Hey, what's up everyone? This is Alfredo. Welcome back to the channel. For those who are new, my name is Alfredo and I make some content on the topics of sustainability and the environment here in this channel. So if those topics are interesting to you, then by all means consider subscribing. And I am one to approach a lot of the interactions or work that I do through relationships. So today I want to share this opportunity of finding out a little bit more of what environmental justice and social justice looks like in the Pacific Northwest, particularly in the Oregon area. And so that's why we're going to have a conversation with my friend Ubaldo. So let's see if he's in. Good morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you may be. My name is Alfredo, and you are now tuned into the Climate Frontline podcast. At the Climate Frontline podcast, I have an opportunity to chat with community leaders, leaders in different industries, as well as artists who are making some amazing music or different types of art. And I really do this conversations to be able to center the communities who are at the front line of climate change. And our community does all this. We're able to change the narrative around climate one conversation at a time. So today I have the opportunity to chat with a friend of mine. Ubaldo, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Alfredo. Thanks for the invitation. I think this is a really interesting program. I've been listening to some of your shows, so I'm really excited and happy to be invited. I think it's an honor to be here.
Yeah. Ubaldo, just to warm us up, I would love to know what is your favorite food or snack?
So my favorite food or snack, well, I like everything with chile limon. I think I get los pepinos, cucumbers, and carrots. I think here we call a salad with lemon and salt, and with lime and salt. That's one of the things, the difference I learned between lemon and lime. So lemon is the yellow one and lime is the green one, the small one. Yeah. So.
Okay, cool. Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Ubaldo. For those folks who may not know who you are, would you mind sharing a little bit of who Ubaldo is and what is it that you like to do in this journey called life? I know you're from the Ciudad de Mexico, so I would love for you to introduce yourself to the audience.
Yeah, thank you, Alfredo. Well, my name is Ubaldo Hernandez, and I was born in Mexico City, and I moved to the United States when I was 24 years old, and I've been living in this community 26 years. So half of my life I've been living in the States after I moved here. But I have always been engaged in social activism since I was a little one. My family, I came from a family of social activists. So that's what I've been doing all my life, and that's something is on my blood. I'll say that. And I grew up listening to my brothers and sisters are having meetings with the schoolmates and discussing ways to solve the world problem. So I grew up in the arena. So I've been a social activist all my life, and since I came to the United States, I encountered that in this country also we have poverty and discrimination. We have social injustices. So since I came to this country, I started working or participating as a social activist. And for the last 4 years, I've been working with Columbia River Keeper as a community organizer.
I would like to know, Ubaldo, what land are you residing in, and who are the peoples that live there, the native peoples? Do you happen to know?
The place where I live is the Yakama Nation. So we live on the land of the Yakamas.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. And it's so nice to have you on the show. I think when I first met you, I told you, hey, it would be awesome to have you in the show. And so, yeah, thank you for being in the show. As you may know, there's a strong focus on language in this show. And so, a question that I have for you is, uh, if you could share a little bit of what Comunidades is, and also the importance of having an organization be in a different language, right? In the United States, why call it Comunidades and why not call it, I don't know, Latino Environmental Justice Columbia River? Yeah, why Comunidades?
So this is a really interesting conversation. So Comunidades came up for me working at Columbia River Keeper. I was hired as a community organizer, and my job was to or is to engage our Latino community to participate and protecting our natural resources. So when I started gathering people, members of the community on the gorge, we started talking about the importance of, as members of the community, make our own decisions on how we want to approach the environmental problems. And we, through those talks on or discussions, we found out that environmental justice or injustices are connected to social injustices. So what we were thinking is we cannot talk about environmental justice without talking social justice, because as members of the Latino community, immigrant community, we know that when an environmental injustice happen, a social injustice happen at the same time, and it happened to us, you know, as people of color or immigrants, or just because we are Latinos, you know. So then we start discussing about that we want to create our own group and how we want to be identified. So one of the things that we have on these conversations with a group about 15, 20 Latinos in the area, we start talking about how, okay, we want to create our own group and how we're going to call it. Yeah, so we have a couple names in mind. And one of the things is that we, as a members of the community, we were thinking about having the name in Spanish. So we were talking about to have the name in Spanish because that will represent part of our heritage. So most of the countries in Latin America, the most spoken language is Spanish, and that's a way that we can communicate, and we want to preserve that. And basically what we talk about the name is that if we have a Spanish name, we kind of reinforce that we respect the way we communicate our language. It's complicated to talk about to say our language because it was imposed language, but anyways, I think that's another conversation. So
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
we were talking about the Spanish is the language that most of the countries in Latin America speak. So, but also we want to be connected with the Americans, with the people that live here. They only speak English, and we were thinking about what word can be used that everybody can understand.
Uh-huh.
And
Uh-huh.
comunidades is one of them, because
Yeah.
comunidades in Spanish, community in English. So it doesn't have that much trouble to get a translation, right? And but also we want the Anglo community to understand what we do, and also we want to have a clear communication with the youth that was born here or is growing up here, and they
Yeah.
don't really speak Spanish that much. So what we want to do is to have the name in Spanish and put a tagline in English, which is amplifying voices for environmental and social justice. So that is clear what we do, because comunidades means a lot of things, you know. It's kind of an open word that it can be a lot of things, like comunidades for culture, comunidades for the food, comunidades for many things, you know, for the sports, and So, but we want to make sure that tagline specifies what Comunidades do.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. It's really important, I think, to be intentional about the language you're using, right? And I think it was pretty easy for me to understand when I found out about Comunidades what it was going to be about. So I think I became a fan just because it said Comunidades already. I was like, all right, these people are it. So
Yeah.
I really appreciate the fact that you were intentional about the language you were using there. Um, I'm curious to know in the for someone who may not know where the Columbia River Gorge is. Could you just paint a little bit of the picture of what are the what is going on there as it relates to pollution, and how does environmental justice really show up in that landscape?
Yeah. So, yeah, the Columbia Gorge is a river, is an area where it's part of the Columbia River. So, this place is located between the state of Oregon and Washington,
Mm-hmm.
and it's on the northwest of the United States. And so this river covers about 1,250 miles is the length of the river. And it's a really long river, and it crosses a lot of communities. And so just to put on perspective where this is located, or where I'm located, is in a small section that they call the gorge, right? Because the river cut through the mountains on Washington and Oregon, and it's I think that the translation for the gorge is a canyon. So it's like we are on the canyon of that where the river passed by, and yeah, that's where we are located, and uh, and this area is really green. Is We are kind of on the edge of the rainforest and the desert, and so it's a really interesting ecosystem, because in Hood River or White Salmon, where I live, is like you look east and you can see all these landscapes start changing, but you can see it from there. You can see all these things are getting drier, and different type of trees like oaks and really scruffy, and you look to the west and you see all these green pines and beautiful landscapes. We are just right there where the division of the different ecosystems create. So, and on this area, we have a lot of problems with different types of um, places, or I'll say some like industrial areas, industrial zones that they contaminate the uh, communities that are communities that have been established along the Columbia River. So one of the things we have problem is like in Portland is a city that is just beside the Columbia River, and we have an area that it's called the Harbor Community, and that area is been highly contaminated. It's considered a superfound site, so the levels of contamination are really high. That it needs to be the Department of Ecology. They have to come up with a term to identify these communities, and they come up with the term superfound site. So we have another superfound site at the east of the Columbia River, which is in the state of Washington, by this area that Tri-Cities, Pasco. That area, there is another superfound site, which is Hanford, where once that place was used to enrich plutonium to produce the nuclear weapons for this country. So that's another found site, because when they stopped using this place, they left millions and millions of gallons of radioactive material sitting underground on that area. So, and this is one of the problems that we have on our communities, kind of the biggest ecologic crisis that we have along the Columbia River.
Yeah, really important to note that the pollution is there, right? And so therefore the communities that are around it are at the front line of the impacts that may come as a result of having this pollution so close to you. So thank you for sharing that. We're going to take a quick break before we dive a little bit more into this conversation with Ubaldo. We'll be right back.
Hot pins, the hot stepper. Music is a weapon, so we bust it in the ether. Deep breather, black cop, but street sweepers. She a true keeper, so she can take it deeper, deeper than the so-called beef for the former. Burning the coma, children of the sauna. Pure fire, cause together forever. We rock the rally, then the party, then the bodies for velocities. So much trouble up in the world again. She bubble, get a red lava bed. But Lady Justice let the flame go. So all power to the people, yo. And if she got it, then you getting through. She melt the change, free the city youth. She heat on a heartbeat. We roll deep with unified peace. She about to free us with the flame now. She keep us moving with the fire now.
Okay, we're back here with Ubaldo, and we are talking about Comunidades, as well as what environmental justice means in the Columbia River Gorge. And just a quick thing that I know about the gorge also is that so much electricity is generated there, right? So it's really important as it relates to the energy grid system, not only in the Pacific Northwest, but I believe some of that energy is actually sent back down to California as well. So really important to note that. And we have here Ubaldo, who is working with communities who are living in the Columbia River Gorge. I'm curious, Ubaldo, what are some of the exciting things that are going on in your work right now as it relates to engaging communities and just allowing some of these stories to surface in a way that that is led by the communities that are part of Comunidades?
Yeah, well, it's so many things happen in this area that they're so exciting to work to engage our community. One of the things that because we focus in protecting our natural resources, we have campaigns that we are working on. For example, that you mentioned earlier about that this area is well known because there is a lot of dams, a lot of electricity is created on this area, and
Right.
and a lot of this electricity goes to California, and we have the most damaged river in the world. So it's so many dams on this river that it's kind of hard to call it a river anymore. So one of the things I learned is that now they call water reservoirs. So there is not a river. So between dams, you call the gorge water reservoir. The other side is the what is the um, John Day water reservoir, so things like that. It's not a river anymore because the flow of the river is not free, so we cannot call it a river. So this is one of the things. Um, but it's a lot of dams along to the Columbia River, and one of the things that happened, and this is really important for us, and one of the campaigns that we're working on is to remove dams and one of the main tributaries of the Columbia River and the Snake River. So we are working with members of the community, with tribal nations, in order to force the government to remove those dams because they stop the flow of the river. So with these things happening, salmons are not able to go to
Right.
the rivers where they traditionally spawn and have reproduced. So
Yeah.
then one of the things that we're working is to remove those dams on the Snake River. which is really important for the to bring back the salmon to the area, because salmon is on the extinction list now because of the dams. Basically, dams are big problem, big part of the problem with salmon extinction. And so this is one of the things, and there is a lot of controversy, right? Because we have this perspective of the dams produce a lot of energy, electricity, and that benefits our area.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, these dams are getting really old, and it's taking it costing a lot more money to keep maintenance than what they produce. Like I was reading an article about how much money it costs to maintain a dam, and it costs more money than what they produce. So at this time, dams are getting obsolete. Plus, we have another type of uh, different technologies to produce electricity. Like we have a lot of how you call these fans along
Wind energy.
wind energy along the Columbia River, and also some places where there is a lot of these uh, um, windmills that they have all over the Northwest. So there is a different ways to produce energy. There is a lot of solar panels also that they use to produce energy. So in reality, dams are not the big producers of electricity anymore.
Yeah. I would love to pivot a little bit into the trainings that are going on in what we were speaking about before this conversation, journalism, no, periodismo, because I think it's really important work that you're doing there. So could you just tell me a little bit about that, and why is it important that these communities are driving the narrative in terms of what's going on there, and you know, putting out some news that is both factual as well as the experiences of these communities.
Yeah, and yes, and one of the things I want, first of all, so I want to apologize because, I mean, this is an first time I on this show, and it's wanted to share all the information because a lot of information, a lot of things happening on this side of the world, and one of the things that you mentioned is about oil transportation, fossil fuel transportation along the river, and a project that we have to engage our community to participate on community journalism. Um, so on the Columbia River, we have a lot of communities living along the river. The Columbia River is a really long and powerful river on the west, on the northwest. So saying that, also there is a lot of corporations using the river also to transport fossil fuel products. And that creates a problem to our communities because every time we see a train a mile long transporting all these um, carts full of fossil fuel, where they put our communities at risk of accidents. Like one of the trains can derail and produce an spillage on the river, or it can just get on fire and explode and destroy communities along the river. We have experience that happened probably 4 years ago that a train derailed and caught on fire in front of a small town, Moiser, in the gorge. So it's really dangerous to transport these type of products along the river. So our communities want to protect from these problems, and we want also our community to raise their voices and get together and bring information that is really relevant to our communities. And because issues like this, and there is not much information that let our communities know what these type of fossil fuel transportation represents to our community, we decide to create a grassroots movement on community journalism. So we start investigating what happened in our communities and how we can send that information so people knows what's going on, from our communities to our communities, instead of waiting for corporations to give us that news. Usually we don't hear corporations talking about how many trains pass through the gorge every day.
Right.
They only tell you when an accident happened.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's so important that we position our communities in a place where they can tell that story. And a quick story that I'll actually share. I don't think I've shared this in many places, but you may recall a few years back, there was a shell rig that was getting some repairs done in Portland, and it was trying to get out. And some activist from Greenpeace actually jumped out of, I believe it was the St. John Bridge,
Uh-huh.
to stop the rig from moving out. And aside some activism that I did with Portland State University, that I remember those 2 days vividly because I was out there helping the kayaks get out, and it was a very memorable moment because, um, you know, I knew that I was making an impact not only locally but also in the communities back in Peru or in the communities back in Mexico or whatever it may be. And I share this to say, like, that's a story that I saw covered a lot by media, but it was a story that was distant from my community, right? It wasn't necessarily something that was upfront to them. And I saw a disconnect there. So I almost wonder, like, hey, maybe if it was told in a podcast or some kind of platform in Spanish, maybe my community would have found it there, which I think underlines the importance of not only language, but then also the journalism that you're speaking about, right?
Yeah,
So I just wanted to share that with you.
and no, that totally makes sense, because let's see, that's something that happened locally, right? But if we see on the news, on the traditionally news outlets from
Right.
corporations, they are not connected with this community. So the perspective from the news are like a this is happening here, but we are not really connected with the action. It's like it's just a news. And that language that we're using it from this community, we want to use in another community, in another part of the country, or in another part of the world. So it's not the community connection, like is somebody from that community reporting to the community. It makes sense,
Yeah,
we will use
yeah.
different words. We say, hey, we saw this in our community, this is happening here, and we know some of these members of the community that they're demonstrating, and they are trying to stop this vessel to leave the place. And we connect with that, like, oh yeah, it's happening here, it's us, and somebody from the community. And when a corporation gives you the news, they're saying, well, this is happening and it's not connected to us. We don't have any connection, just the news.
Yeah, absolutely. And what I'm hearing from you is underlining the importance of language, right? I mean, you and I, we were just having a conversation that's similar to this in Spanish, and that took us one way, and now we're talking about rigs in Oregon, or super fun sites in Oregon. And so, yeah, thank you so much for being in the show again, Ubaldo. Clearly, like I had said before, this is just the beginning, and I think we have many topics to explore with you. So, one question I had for you is, so for the youth that live in Oregon, or maybe even in the southern part of Washington, who may be listening to you right now, and maybe they are about to graduate high school and are considering some kind of college degree. What is your message to them as it relates to, maybe tips on moving forward with their journey, and how they may strategize around, still holding their values close to Pachamama, Mother Earth, or environmental justice, social justice, and these issues that we're talking about here, as well as in the different platforms that we'll get a chance to talk about in a little bit.
Yeah, one of the what I see is environmental advocacy is changing. the landscape is changing. And I'm gonna speak to assuming that a lot of Latino students are going to listen to this show, right? A lot of Latinos that are finished high school or going wanting to go into college, and they don't know what they want to do. The environmental advocacy world is changing. The landscape is transforming to open working spaces for people of color, for Latinos, for our communities. We know that this environmental advocacy is being dominated by the white community. It's been really wide for a long, long time. And now it's changing. Now it's open spaces for people like me, like you, to participate and taking advantage of these jobs. These jobs are well paid. They don't pay low wages. They're really good salaries sometimes, and this is grand. These are great opportunities for members of our community to think about studying environmental science, uh, but also environmental law, uh, and also biology and chemistry, and all these things at the end can transform into environmental advocacy. All these jobs that are opening in order to reach out to our Latino community. And for young Latinos that are finished high school and they want to go to college and they don't know what to do, I invite them to look around and look at the environmental advocacy groups and think about some kind of education that is focused on that. And that are jobs for the future. So now, Alfredo, I think you're a witnesses of that. There is a lot more Latinos starting to work in these areas, and they are really good jobs. And and also you are connecting with Pachamama, con la Madre Tierra, no? And you are connecting with our environment and protecting the future of your communities. Think about that. Now that we have a lot of Latino community growing in these areas, having their families, their kids are going to stay here. The youth are going to be here. Then they're going to have kids, and we need to ensure that these communities stay green and healthy for our future generations.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. I think at its simplest form, the problem I think we're facing is a disconnect, right? A disconnect of one, each other, and two, with Mother Earth. So I really appreciate you and the work you're doing in the communities in the gorge, as well as I'm sure there's been many other successes you've had both in Mexico as well as here in the U.S. So thank you so much for being in the show, Ubaldo. I'm curious to know if you'd be willing to share some of the ways in which folks can find out about you, Comunidades, and how they can stay in touch. Maybe there's an opportunity for folks to chime in and help out with the project. Please, by all
Uh,
means.
yeah. We have Comunidades. We have our Facebook page, and you can find it at Comunidades Amplifying Voices for Environmental and Social Justice. We are working to train members of the community in community journalism. We just finished training 20 members of communities in the Northwest and Washington and Oregon. Uh, you can check our Facebook page. Listen to the conversations we have with every Sunday, Tuesday, and Thursday every week. We talk about what's going on in our communities. We talk about from social justice to environmental justice topics, and that's a really broad conversation. And you can also listen to a podcast that I produce. That it's Conoce tu Columbia. You can find this podcast on SoundCloud, Spotify, and iTunes. You can check this out and conocetucolumbia.org. and it will take you to the Columbia River Keeper Spanish section, and you will see all the podcasts that we have on our webpage. So those are some ways to connect. You can contact me, send me an email. My email is ubaldo at columbiariverkeeper.org. And you can give me a call if you want. My phone number is 541-490-7722, and I'll be happy to answer a call or send me a text message. That easy.
All right. Well, Ubaldo, it's been a pleasure to have you on the show. And for folks listening in or listening on YouTube, you can find the links to what Ubaldo has mentioned on the video description. Or if you're listening on podcast, you can find those on the show notes. So, Ubaldo, before we part ways, are there any last words of wisdom or message you'd like to share as we close off this show?
La madre tierra es lo que todos tenemos en común.
Okay. And for my folks who are still learning some Spanish, is that Mother Earth is what we have most in common, or the main thing we have in common, I believe. So, yeah, thank you so much, Ubaldo. And I hope to have you on the show sometime soon. Otherwise, maybe you can send one of your representatives here too. They'll always be welcome. And I'm just excited to continue to develop this relationship with you. And that's all for today, folks.
Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Ubaldo. He is really an amazing person that I think his strategy around journalism is going to work out really well for him and the communities in the Gorge. So be sure to follow his content that he makes through his podcast as well as the Facebook group. I also wanted to make a small ask. Actually, I'm looking for some artists who may be creating music or even just visual arts that you think would be a good fit to feature in this show. So please get me in touch with those either by leaving a comment section or sending me a message to climatefrontlinepodcast@gmail.com. Again, this conversation was part of the podcast at the Climate Frontline. And I hope that you enjoyed it. I hope you consider joining me in our community there. And I'll leave a couple links below. I am on Patreon if you'd like to support me on Patreon, or any other way you can contribute to this changing narrative we're doing in our community around how people understand and how they engage at the Climate Frontline would be greatly appreciated. Otherwise, the last thing I'll share with you is that we have this conversation in Spanish. It was a different conversation where we get a chance to touch on immigration, as well as what does this work look like in Latin America. And if you're interested in hearing or maybe practicing some Spanish, the video will be right here. It'll pop up right there. Otherwise, I will see you next time at the Climate Frontline, or on this channel, or maybe even in Clubhouse. I don't know. I'll see you soon. Peace.